From the unworthy cheering over Charlie Kirk's death, we must learn one thing. This is the title of an article in the German magazine Focus that I wrote. And as many of you do not speak German, I translated it and want to read that translation out. In the show notes, you find the link. And this article, I want to add another perspective to the discussion. Um, Typically, I'm a culture philosopher and I do business, but this scenario struck me as something very important and something unique is happening here that is not yet discussed. My core focus is behavior. Why do people do what they do, and how do cultures behave? This is my main focus, and I typically use it for entrepreneurs and businesses and help them change the culture, change behavior. But in here, in this phenomenon, with the behaviors and the reactions and the cheering over Charlie Kirk's death, there is a special set of behaviors where I ask myself, why the fuck is that happening? And I decided to put it into an article. I want to share it here for everybody who can't read German in the English language. So let's kick it off. Charlie Kirk was shot. While his family mourns, many online celebrate. What this hatred reveals about us and about the state of democracy. The conservative activist and influencer Charlie Kirk has been shot dead at just 31 years old. His wife has lost her husband, his two children their father. A tragedy that hurts, especially when you think of the toddlers. And just as a personal note, my son is 3 years old, about the age that Charlie's oldest son was, and then he has another child that's even younger. And I couldn't imagine how it would be if they would lose me and if I would lose them. And it's like this is such a tragedy. And in that context, where I get some wet eyes, I found it terrible that people are applauding, people are cheering. So let's read on. And yet, online, people cheer his death. Some say he deserved it. Others exult, the world is better now. Still others wish him to rot in hell or to rest in piss, is what I read. And honestly, by the way, this is why I was shocked, and this is why I decided I write that article, because I needed to comment on that. So, moving on. Personally, I could never agree with many of his positions and would have argued passionately against them. But these reactions to his murder, they shake me. In my value system, nothing justifies such brutality, and yet people celebrate a killing. That forces us to ask two questions. First, what has to happen for someone to rejoice in the death of a father of two? Second, what does it say about our society that such reactions are shared millions of times and even liked? A culture of cheering death. After Kirk's murder, clips and comments flooded the platform. They showed how deep the political trench has become. This isn't about winning a debate, it's about celebrating the death of an opponent. That's not just tasteless, it's a look into the abyss of our culture and into the loss of our humanity. Kirk was known for his debating formats. Anyone could challenge him at his events with arguments, with contradiction. That is democracy at its core. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, like listening, debating, waiting. And even many of his audience members said, I almost never agree with him, but he helps me sharpen my own opinion. And also, if you look, by the way, in the area of speaking and rhetoric and dialectic, and look at Hegel, the philosopher, it's clear that you need to look at the opposing perspectives, and that only that will make you smart and will have you make good decisions. So Charlie Kirk was actually in his action and his job at that time at the core front of what democracy meant. That someone who fostered debate is now murdered while he was doing his job shows the perversion of how we handle difference. Kirk had clear conservative Christian influence, pro-market position. You could criticize, yet, and maybe at some points you should have, and I would have. But instead of seeing him as a political opponent, he was increasingly morally demonized. Demonized, sorry. Wrong was not long enough. He was cast as evil. Othering and labeling, the prelude of enemy marking. The mechanisms follows a pattern. First, a person gets labeled. He is or she is right-wing, Nazi, leftist snowflake, climate terrorist, fundamentalist, conspiracy theorist, whatnot. And you see it holds true for both sides, right? I'm not picking a side here. I'm just describing a phenomenon. Such labels, they now shrink complex people with highly complicated opinions and highly differentiated opinions in just one single trait. Then comes the othering. The person is defined out of the community. It's not us, it's them. It's not us again. From political opponent to morally devalued foreign body. And by the way, if you look in all kinds of scenarios where people are really fundamentally hurt, and if you look in all humanity dramas where people are hurt in hundreds, thousands, and hundred thousands, we see that dehumanization as a key marker of those functions, right? In the Nazi time in Germany, if you look at how the Nazis talked about the Jews, this was dehumanization, right? They were described as rats and just uh, animals, and dehumanization was and demonization, like they are bad, they're doing bad things to us, was at the core of that terrible movement. And whenever we see that now, we should be all terrified. But let me read on before I lose my temper here. This rhetorical downgrading is the prelude of enemy marking. Once labeled and othered, it's just easier to demonize. The inhibition threshold drops. You're no longer fighting a human with arguments, you're now fighting the symbol of the evil. Or you're fighting the evil, you're fighting the devil, or whatnot. And that's how the ground is prepared for dehumanization and, in an extreme case, then violence. How media reinforces the pattern. What makes this worse? These mechanisms don't just play out online, they're echoed in traditional media. And now I bring, for everybody who's not in Germany, I bring now an example from a satire show in Germany that has been doing that exact same thing with somebody just a few months ago. But I'm sure you will find similar examples in every country where media is, without delivering proof, without delivering argument, just labeling people as any kind of the labels we had above, and thus will just also destroy their career. And in that one case, it was a satire show from a moderator called Jan Böhmermann. He used labeling deliberately, reducing people to a keyword, an insult, an enemy image. Arguments nowhere, as his clash with Clownsveld showed. What looks like satire often functions as a social pillory. People laugh when a political opponent is shoved in a box on TV or in a viral clip. But that's exactly how we as a society learn it's acceptable to reduce people to labels. Also, it's acceptable to put the label on and not have any proof, not have any argument, not have any reasonable foundation for that label. And this normalizes the first step of dehumanization, lowering the threshold where political conflict slides from argument into degradation. And this is something where traditional media is guilty a lot, I want to add. Why people dehumanize opponents? Psychologically, it's explainable. Values are always hopes for the future. If you believe your values will make the world better, then contradiction feels like a threat. Whoever stands in the way blocks the better world and becomes the enemy. Now, let's add something on here. Whenever you have a value, you have a judgment. You say one thing is better than the other. If you have the value family, if you have the value friends, you judge that investing in family and friends is better, and you have a vision of how friendship and family should be. So your values are not just decision helps for minor things. Your values are major visions for the world. If you are conservative in your values, you have a vision of the world, how it should be, so that it would be the world you want to live in. If you're progressive, you have a vision of the world on how it should be that you would love to live in this. Now, This is now something where the moment somebody has different values, they are standing in your way to get to your world because they want to get somewhere different. And we have them collide. And that's what sets us under stress. Under stress, people default to 4F patterns: fight, flight, freeze, and flock. In ideological conflicts, fighting, they are to blame. We need now somebody with authority to go in and convince them. We need to force them. And also flocking, now it's us, we are the good ones, against them, they are the bad ones. And you are now either with us and then you're the good guy, or you're with them, then you're the bad guy, and then you're fought against. Those two dynamics, fighting and flocking, dominate. And the opponent gets then dehumanized, gets demonized, gets turned into evil. And if someone is evil, then it feels legitimate to fight them, right? And if you're fighting them anyways, well, killing them is just the next step. Once it's done, you can even rejoice. One less threat. You have one bigger opportunity to get the world where you want it to be. And that is explosive, right? The philosopher Immanuel Kant would have probably turned in his grave if you would read about that. He looked at how people would behave in those kind of value gaps and where different values would turn out. And as a philosopher looking at the Enlightenment post phase, the beginning postmodernism, he saw that people wouldn't have aligned value structures due to religion, and thus he saw conflict rising. And his prognosis would be very grim: the rise of conflict, the rise of war. Because this thinking, this behavior shifts political conflict from argumentation to annihilation. And that is really a problem we shouldn't tolerate. Democracy in shock. Charlie Kirk wanted to convince, with words, not with violence. He stopped for a culture of debate. He kept repeating, as long as we talk, we don't need to fight. That's what he embodied. Conversation, that was his thing, that was his whole show. That he of all people was murdered while exercising his democratic right, or rather say duty, strikes democracy at its core and accelerates a trend we've already seen. For years now, entrepreneurs, celebrities, and citizens have withdrawn. I rather say nothing, the price is too high. We have people being blamed in public, we have people put out warnings against, we have all the kind of weird attacks, people losing their jobs, and so on. People rather say nothing. And now we have a new dimension of fear that emerges. The speaking up can cost you not just your social standing or the judgment of the others, but now it can cost you your life. And once it does, there's people actually applauding and being happy about it. What the fuck? That's actually not in the article, the what the fuck. Sorry for that one. But you see, you see what it does to me, because I'm really, we're really at a critical point. But let me read on. It comes down. This is not the beginning of the end of democracy. It is democracy in collapse already. We are in the collapse already, and we are way too deep in, and it will be a fight to get out of that, I must add. What we must do now. This murder must be a wake-up call. Every murder, and especially every political murder, demands condemnation without relativization. To relativize. Well, sorry, I'm not a native speaker. You know what I meant, right? Whoever celebrates the death of a young father and thereby also logically celebrates the trauma of his kids reveals moral distortion that is dangerous to society. Our answer cannot be cynicism. It must be the opposite. More debate, more dialogue, more humanity. Basically, more Charlie Kirk. Nor can it be striking back. States must set a clear framework where everything permissible can be said without sanction. If a state refuses that, tyranny has already begun, quietly in the seed. Whoever criticizes free speech has already surrendered democracy at heart and begun trampling freedom. We cannot allow that. Instead of more dehumanization, we need a culture of rehumanization. the ability to see others not as labels, but as people and as humans in all their contradictions and complexity, precisely when we don't share their opinions and positions. If we achieve that, our society will not only be less brutal, it will be more humane, and we will save our democracy. And listen, everyone, to me, I think we're really about pushing through to save democracy here. We are eradicating more and more rights, we are eradicating more and more freedom, and we are building up trenched political positions that will not do us good and that will do us harm. If we want to save our democracy, in which we have in the West lived under freedom and peace for so long and so good, if we want to rescue that, we need to start having the honest fight again. Argue, discuss, and then drink a beer together is what an ideal of German politics a few dozen decades, no, a few dozen not, but a few decades ago looked like. Somewhere 1950s, 60s, 70s. There, the political opponents, they really fought each other, they shouted at each other. And when they were done shouting, they went, hey, let's go, let's have a beer. And they actually meant that. So let's start being human again. Let's rescue our democracy. Thank you very much for listening. In the next videos, we'll have entrepreneurship content again, neuroscience content again, behavioral science content again, and a lot of entrepreneurship things. So thanks for listening in there, and please say your opinion and make sure that everybody else can as well without being punished.